So, we finally reached the finale of the God of War Greek saga. Again, I have not forgotten about that one. Welcome to the 4th episode of my ongoing retrospective of the God of War franchise. I know it's been a while, but with the Batman videos and some Mario Kart reviews out of the way, I think it's time to get back to our boy Kratos. So far, I have covered the first 2 entries of the God of War series on the PlayStation 2 and the PSP titles. If you've already watched those videos, welcome back. And if you're new here, consider checking out those videos first. To recap my thoughts, I found God of War 1 to be a good start to an awesome franchise. God of War 2 didn't add too much to the already great formula laid out by its predecessor, but it was still a damn good first party title to end the PS2 generation on. Chains of Olympus was a fine game and all, and impressive for being on a handheld, but it lacked the replay value of the first 2 entries, and that's where Ghost of Sparta came in. Not only was it an improvement over Chains of Olympus, but it managed to stand out as one of the finest entries in the series, with better level design, the Arms of Sparta, and a fast-paced but well-written story. In hindsight though, the magic attacks in this game, they were fine enough, but they paled in comparison to the ones offered in God of War 1 and 2. But regardless, the story was very well done. I would say that this was the game where you could feel the most bad for Kratos, and it helps us understand his spiral downfall by God of War 2 much better, with the loss of the last 2 people in his life that were close to him. With God of War 2 being such a great game to end the PlayStation 2 era on, God of War 3 certainly had big shoes to fill in, with the jump to the PlayStation 3. Cory Barlog was originally set to be the director of God of War 3, but he left Sony Santa Monica 8 months into development for other business opportunities. So once again, the directing duties were handed over to another series veteran, this time to Stig Asmussen, who served as the lead environment artist and art director for the first 2 games. And while Cory was still on the team, he expressed interest in a co-op mode. However, Asmussen stated that due to the experience they wanted to deliver, the multiplayer mode simply didn't fit into the equation. It's perfectly understandable since this is the final chronological chapter in the God of War Greek saga, and you want to end it on a high note. But at the same time, it would have been interesting to see at least as an unlockable mode after you beat the game once. And I suppose that this aspect would be revisited in the next console entry in the series. We'll get to that when we get to that. And David Jaffe left Sony Santa Monica, and to that I say, good riddance. In the God of War 2 video, I said this. I may not agree with what David Jaffe thinks about the direction the series went in after this, but I can somewhat understand where he's coming from since he was the creator of the series. I would like to have my words stricken from the record. As if David Jaffe's recent inappropriate behavior online isn't bad enough, the main issue I have with David Jaffe is how petty he sounds towards the character growth of not just Kratos, but other characters. Especially since I find Kratos' characterization to be mostly consistent throughout the series, even in the Norse era. I know I'm getting a bit ahead of myself since these are points that I should probably save for the Norse era videos, but to sum it up, Kratos has always been a tragic character from the very first opening cutscene of the first game, and his tragic life is a running thing for the whole series. And with God of War 3 being the conclusion to the Greek era, it's essentially the culmination of all the tragic events that Kratos has been put through so far, resulting in his decision to wage war against the Greek pantheon of gods. God of War 3 would release for the PlayStation 3 in March 2010, 3 years after God of War 2, and 2 years after Chains of Olympus, and just a few months before Ghost of Sparta. So let's see what the final chronological chapter in the God of War Greek saga has to offer, and how Kratos is gonna deliver the gods what's coming to them. First of all, this game still looks visually breathtaking even after 15 years. I'm not joking when I say that this game still holds up very well compared to games released today. Yeah, there are some models that look a bit outdated, but still, the leaps in graphics are getting smaller and smaller. The developers were aiming to deliver visuals in 1080p, but had to settle for 720p. But even so, this is still a gorgeous game to look at. The environments, the lighting, the models, the rain effects. This is probably the best looking game the PlayStation 3 has to offer, and one of, if not the best looking game of the 7th generation. The first few games utilized pre-rendered CGI cutscenes for pivotal moments of the stories, while God of War 3 sticks to showcasing its cutscenes with the in-game graphics. The new art director Ken Feldman, and of course the rest of the visual team, did a fantastic job with this game's art style and helping the game visually stand the test of time. And not to mention the opening cinematic by Imaginary Forces, which visually recaps the events of the first two God of War games. This unique art style is also used for flashbacks during the main story, and it's clearly inspired by ancient Greek, with fire and blood representing Kratos' dark past. Obviously, Ghost of Sparta hadn't been released yet, so this opening only recaps the events of God of War 1 and 2, but it still manages to convey all of the important story moments that led to Kratos' mental state being flushed down the toilet. And the game picks up right where we left off at the end of God of War 2, with Kratos teaming up with the Titans to destroy all of the gods.
Zeus! Your son has returned. I bring the destruction of Olympus!
And we even get the Wilhelm scream! And this is where we get the tutorial section of the game. Kratos' moveset for now is largely unchanged. You can still perform light and heavy attacks with square and triangle, grab enemies with the circle button, and counterattack with the golden fleece by pressing L1. God of War 3 introduces a new tactic to combat, where Kratos grabs an enemy and you can make him charge at other enemies simply by pressing the square button. This move is really fun and helps even the odds. Or you can just rip enemies in half like a phone book, or stomp on them. The magic attacks are now activated using R2 instead of L2, and Kratos' only magic attack option at the beginning of the game is summoning a giant tornado with the Blade of Olympus, called Divine Reckoning. It's a serviceable starter attack. I suppose giving Kratos all the magic and weapons he had by the end of God of War 2 would have been overwhelming for those who missed out on that game, but he still has a fully upgraded health and magic meter from his last adventure where he defied the dumbasses of fate. The combat in this game is naturally an evolution of the first game's combat, but it feels smoother than ever. God of War's combat has always been well designed, but God of War 3's combat has a tad smoother feel than the previous games. Controlling Kratos feels better, making the combat more fluid and fun, and that's a very good thing. Not to say that I had issues with controlling Kratos in the previous games, it's just a feeling, I guess. You'd probably have to play the game to understand what I'm talking about. And when the game feels good to control, that's how you ease the player into the experience and help them have fun. And I love T.C. Carson's battle roars. He really sells making Kratos sound like a determined warrior, and at this point, he's pissed. More pissed than usual anyway. As you make the climb up Mount Olympus, you're reintroduced to the climbing, grappling, and gliding mechanics that have been used in the previous games. The grappling mechanic is just as fun as it was in God of War 2. You still have to build up momentum as you swing, which is really satisfying to do. And you come across the tomb of Ares, the fallen dumbass of war. The Greek gods seem to have a thing for burying their dead in ice for everyone to see. The first god to take a stand against Kratos is the sea god Poseidon, who is undoubtedly still pissed off at Kratos for wrecking his kingdom 2 games ago. Poseidon's fight has a few phases, but it mostly consists of avoiding his lightning attacks and hitting him until you can do a QuickTime event on him. And the button prompts are placed on the screen in relation to where they're positioned on the PlayStation controller, just like in Ghost of Sparta, which is neat, and does make it easier to process what button you have to press to get past the QuickTime event. Gaia takes out Poseidon's giant form with a Falcon Punch! Launching Kratos at the real Poseidon, giving him some one-on-one time with the god he has the biggest bone to pick with, besides Zeus. Poseidon tries to warn Kratos of the consequences of killing him and his fellow gods, but Kratos at this point is more determined than ever to get his revenge on Zeus. And he doesn't care how many gods or innocent people he has to kill to get to the King of Olympus. So he ignores Poseidon's warnings and tells him to prepare for his death. Let's not forget that Kratos' mother was held prisoner in Poseidon's kingdom, and that very kingdom that held the gateway to Death's domain, where Kratos' brother Deimos was tortured and tormented for the majority of what remained of his life. So Kratos gives Poseidon arguably the most brutal and agonizing death in the game for his role in Callisto and Deimos' deaths. Zeus may have orchestrated both their captivities, but Poseidon, whether directly or indirectly, still played a part in Kratos losing his mother and brother on the same day. And that event threw fuel into the fire that was Kratos' already burning frustration against the gods of Olympus, and is conveyed by the use of the music titled Rage of Sparta. When this theme plays, you can feel Kratos' anger and frustration boiling, and he has brutal deaths in store for every last god on Olympus. But this one was deeply personal. Poseidon's agonizing death results in the sea levels rising, drowning the entirety of Greece. But Kratos does not care for any of the deaths or destruction he causes by killing the gods. All he cares about is getting his revenge on Zeus. And that goal seems to be within reach, as Gaia gives her great-grandson a boost to confront his father. But Zeus decides it's too early for a final boss, so he one-shots Kratos and Gaia off his kingdom. And Kratos is once again betrayed by someone he placed his trust in, as Gaia selfishly claims that she only freed Kratos from death so that he could save the Titans. To her, Kratos was nothing more than a pawn used to accomplish the Titans' goal, and Kratos falls to the depths of the underworld once again. Hang on, can't he just use those wings he snatched off Pit to fly back up? Oh no, he can only glide with them. Duh. We then get a tap into Kratos' mind, giving insight to his mindset after being betrayed yet again. He claims that despite his setbacks, he will defeat Olympus and get his revenge. Kratos lands in the River Styx, where he's Metroided once more. Hang on, doesn't the River Styx make you more powerful? Along with Kratos' powers once again being stripped away, the blades of Athena are reduced to rust. Speaking of the devil, she shows up as a ghost, claiming that her death brought her to a higher existence, and changed her mind to take a stand against Zeus, after she sacrificed herself to save him from Kratos. Kratos is rightfully suspicious of her sudden change in perspective, especially after learning her role in Deimos' death. To win back her brother's trust, Athena takes Kratos' rusted blades and gives them a final upgrade, taking on their most sinister form, the Blades of Exile, with more sharp edges and a black and orange color scheme. The Blades of Chaos are a constant reminder of Kratos' pledge to Ares, the Blades of Athena reflect on his time as the god of war, and the Blades of Exile reflect on the darkest chapter of Kratos' life in his pursuit to bring down Olympus and not caring for the lives of anyone unfortunate enough to stand in his path. In this game, the magic attacks are tied to whatever set of weapons you're using. With the Blades of Athena being replaced, their Divine Reckoning attack is switched out for the Army of Sparta, where an army of fallen Spartans come back from the dead to assist their general for one last quest. You get shielded while arrows rain down on your enemies. This one is really cool, effective, and very in line with Kratos' character. After being Metroided, Kratos has once again lost a bunch of moves that you will have to reacquire by upgrading the blades with red orbs as usual. The gear he's left with from God of War 2 consists of the Golden Fleece, Icarus' wings, and the Blade of Olympus, which serves a different purpose than in God of War 2. Instead of being an alternate weapon, the Blade of Olympus in God of War 3 now serves as Kratos' Spartan rage. After being betrayed by the gods and now the Titans, Kratos must now rely on his own rage to get through combat, but it's the character's greatest strength. Along with the Phoenix Feathers and Gorgon Eyes, you'll also want to keep a lookout for Minotaur Horns, which will upgrade the third meter. However, instead of the blades having a firepower mechanic from Ghost of Sparta, the third meter instead represents the item bar. You will acquire items throughout your journey that you can use during combat, but mostly for puzzles. The first item you will acquire is Apollo's bow from Perithous, who was forced to spend eternity stuck in a cell with brambles. And Kratos, in typical Kratos fashion, frees him from his torment by burning him alive, and gratefully takes the bow. You aim with L2, and if you hold the square button, the arrow will ignite and burn enemies, or clear away brambles blocking your path. During his latest trip to the underworld, Kratos comes across another corpse of one of his previous victims, Persephone. He uses her coffin as part of a puzzle-solving section, which further pisses off her widowed husband, Hades, now played by Clancy Brown. Yep, they got Mr. Krabs to voice the god of the underworld. For Hades' boss fight, you have to hit him enough times to destroy his soul pieces before he reclaims them, and avoid his chain wall attacks. He's got a second phase where he gets big, and you can swing around to attack him from behind. You then finish off the fight by taking his claws and ripping his soul out of his body, resulting in all the souls of the underworld breaking free. The claws of Hades are similar to the blades of exile, except that you can now unleash skulls on your enemies, and you can summon the spirits of enemies by pressing R2. The claws are an okay alternative to the blades. They're not quite as quick, but their soul attacks can be helpful for crowded areas, though I stuck with the blades as usual. Kratos comes across the god's once valued blacksmith, Hephaestus, banished to the underworld as a result of Kratos finding Pandora's box, which was created by Hephaestus on behalf of Zeus to contain the evils of the world. He crafted a girl to be the key, Pandora. He would grow to love her as his own daughter, but Zeus wanted the box in a safe place where no mortal could retrieve it. Hephaestus, wanting to protect his daughter, insisted that it would be safe atop of Kronos. So Zeus was not very happy when Kratos got past Kronos, all the trials at the temple, and retrieved the box. Didn't he want Kratos to kill Ares anyway? Hephaestus decides to be an ally to Kratos, for now at least, by aiding him with information on how to kill Zeus, and requesting him to find his daughter. Kratos initially brushes it off, claiming not to care, but Hephaestus taps at what little humanity Kratos has left, saying he was also once a father. Upon making his way back to the land of the living, he crosses paths with Gaia, who is still injured and has the gall to ask Kratos for help after she threw him under the bus an hour ago. Gaia, supposedly being the narrator throughout the Greek era, should have known better than to expect Kratos to help her after she broke his trust. Kratos rightfully turns Gaia's words against her and chops her already damaged hand off, sending her plummeting to the sea below. After that, Kratos takes down Helios, who probably has the least amount of beef with Kratos. Some say that it's the case with Poseidon, but I'm sorry, those people are objectively wrong. Kratos destroyed his fucking kingdom. Why wouldn't Poseidon have reason to hate Kratos? Helios, on the other hand, reminds Kratos that he has not forgotten the debt he owes him for saving him from Morpheus in the events of Chains of Olympus. However, Kratos accepts Helios' debt by violently tearing his head off his shoulders just to use it as a flashlight. You use it with L2 and triangle to illuminate dark areas, find hidden secrets, and during combat, if you hold L2 and triangle, you can send a flash beam of light blinding the enemies. There are also some chests that can be found by flashing Helios' head, so look out for those. After beheading Helios and depriving Greece of the sun despite knowing the consequences from the events of Chains of Olympus, Kratos comes across the Chain of Balance, a giant set of chains that extend from the underworld to the top of Mount Olympus. There are a few sections in the game where the player will have to navigate Kratos through this giant chain, while avoiding getting hit by debris or obstacles. You can use the right analog stick to dodge these obstacles and navigate through the gaps. And the music is really freaking good. It really makes you feel like a badass as you fly up this large chain as flawlessly as possible before you deliver a Titan his eye examination. Upon reaching the top of the chain, Kratos comes across Pandora's box, protected by the Flame of Olympus. Athena tells Kratos that it supposedly still contains power that he can use to kill Zeus. Kratos comes across the verbally annoying god Hermes. This cocky bastard doesn't have much of a boss fight, as you just have to catch up with him, do some climbing and platforming, and then catapult at the motherfucker. You then get to chop off his legs and acquire his shoes to Looney Tunes your way up walls. And his death results in a plague being released upon what's left of the population. Shit. Kratos approaches the forum, where he is greeted by Hera, Zeus's depressed and drunken wife and Oh, for fuck's sake! I knew Zeus was a sick fuck, but jeez! Kratos inquires about Pandora's whereabouts, and in response, Hera sends Hercules to kill Kratos. And she decides to spectate the confrontation between the bastard children of her filthy, disloyal, cheating husband and... sibling. What is Greek mythology? Also, Hercules is played by Kevin Sorbo, who has previous experience portraying the mythological hero. Hercules is envious of his brother, believing Zeus favored Kratos since he allowed him to become the god of war, while he was sent to find a bloody apple. Even though Kratos is in a morally deprived mindset with his goal to kill Zeus, as a Spartan, he still values brotherhood, and tries to talk Hercules out of this frivolous fight. But Hercules insists on fighting and wanting to claim the throne of God of War for himself. Hercules is a tough warrior and is capable of blocking your attacks, and being a big guy, he delivers heavy blows. When you wear him down, you throw him against these thorns on the wall. You then get to grab his boxing gloves and beat the snot out of him. Hercules, in a last-ditch effort, lifts the entire stage, and Kratos somehow manages to hold on while wearing boxing gloves. And he uses them to turn Hercules' face into a pancake. The Nemean Necestus, or as you can tell I like to call them, Hercules' boxing gloves, can punch through these crystal thingies that block your path, and their magic attack involves Kratos slamming the ground, sending out a shockwave. I absolutely love these weapons because... come on, they're fucking boxing gloves, man! These are hands down the best alternative weapons to the blades. They don't slow you down, and they're just as fun to use in certain situations. That's how you do alternate weapons in combat. Kratos will then enter the chamber of Aphrodite, wife of Hephaestus, and Kratos, in typical Kratos fashion, gets busy with her.
This is definitely for mature audiences only. Parents should not let their children watch this.
You're damn right, you shouldn't be playing this game, you sneaky little Call of Duty kids. Hephaestus is not pleased to see that Kratos has been banging his wife, and when he realizes that Kratos means to use Pandora to unlock the box, which would definitely result in her death, he decides to send Kratos to his supposed demise at the hands of his grandfather, Kronos. Also banished to the underworld by Zeus as a result of Kratos' success in the first game, and still carrying the Temple of Pandora on his back. Pretty cool fighting atop of Kronos and seeing the main setting of the first game as we swing past it. That very temple where you did all those deadly puzzles and first found Pandora's box now seems smaller. Kronos gives his grandson the same treatment he gave to his children. But unfortunately for him, Kratos does not go down that easily, as he cuts his inside open. This is probably the most gruesome boss fight in the game, since Kronos is such a big guy. Kronos even has the gall to accuse Kratos of murdering his own kind, when he himself is notorious for eating his own children, and tried to do the same to Kratos not 2 minutes ago. You then get to put this bastard out of his misery by stabbing him in the Sonic the Hedgehog with the Blade of Olympus. Surprised that the Spartan managed to avoid becoming Kronos' lunch, Hephaestus gives Kratos a new set of weapons that initially electrocute him, but Kratos instead uses them to kill Hephaestus. And in his dying words, he begs Kratos not to hurt Pandora. Kratos' last set of weapons for his final adventure in Greece is the Nemesis Whip, a set of electrical whips that can shock enemies and used to fix a broken bridge. To be honest, I never really favored using these. They're not bad, they sort of work, but I just don't enjoy using them as much as my trusty blades or boxing gloves. While the combat is more fluid to control, don't think that this means that battles will be a walk in the park. If you're playing this game on the normal difficulty, the game may put up a bit of a challenge. I died a lot during my initial playthrough for this review. This game will throw lots of different enemy types at you at once, and while you could button mash your way through encounters with the Blades of Exile, you also have to be ready to block or counter enemies' attacks. When the enemies give off a flash, that's when you know you have an opportunity to counter. And my dumbass only realized that this has been a mechanic since the first game. Maybe it's because I've only been a fan for 2 years and got more used to the Norse combat, but I always assumed that Kratos gained the ability to parry in God of War 2 after he acquired the Golden Fleece. But no, you've always been able to do it since the first game. The Golden Fleece just adds the ability to counter projectiles, and Kratos has been able to parry physical attacks since day one. When I was playing through the PS3 version, the abundance of enemies that the game threw at me caused me to feel overwhelmed and unsure of what attacks I could block and what I was meant to dodge, and when I focused on one enemy, another came and kicked me in the ass and ruined my day. But before I got to recording the PS4 version of the game, I instead went back and replayed the first 2 games and Ghost of Sparta, not just to re-jog my memory on story beats, but to see if those games were any harder, and lo and behold, that was when I found out that in the first game, you could parry an enemy when they're flashing. And boy do I feel like a dumbass for thinking that this was a mechanic exclusive to the Golden Fleece and Sun Shield. Because once I got back to God of War 3 for my PS4 playthrough, I was doing much better than my run on the PS3 version, with significantly less deaths after getting some practice with these 3 games. And it helped that this time I was more prepared for obstacles. And maybe this might have something to do with it, or maybe not, but the PlayStation 5 controller felt much better to use than the PlayStation 3 controller. Not that the DualShock 3 is a bad controller by any means, but the DualSense feels much better in my hands, which helped me perform better in combat. Again, I'm not as experienced with these games as many longtime fans are, who have probably sunk years into memorizing Kratos' moveset, the enemy fight patterns, and getting busy with orb collecting. God of War 3 is not the hardest game in the world. In fact, none of the games are that brutal unless you specifically choose that difficulty. As long as you keep the parry mechanic in mind instead of just mindless button mashing, you should be able to get through the combat sections just fine. If not, you'll still be able to beat God of War 3 with trial and error. It's not as unforgivingly hard as From Software games. There are also some enemies with shields, but all you have to do is hit them with the Nemean boxing gloves to get through them, so they're not too big of a deal. The game at its core is still a God of War game, and it is still satisfying to slaughter all these enemies. God of War 3 also has a plethora of puzzles to solve on your quest for vengeance, and a lot of them are deadly. Kratos can push blocks and objects at a much faster pace to make puzzle solving less tedious. Look at this motherfucker go! That's some serious Spartan training right there. Also, it's worth mentioning that this is also incorporated to Ghost of Sparta, and these spiky objects can be used to bulldoze enemies with ease. I had no idea you could do that until I did my recording for the PS4 version and pulled this off by accident. Some of the puzzles in this game, I have to say, are pretty creative. Like this one where you have to play the God of War melody with the PlayStation buttons. I know this minigame is out of place compared to the rest of the game, but that's why I like it, damn it. Or this one where you have to play around with perspective in Hera's garden, after Kratos snaps the bitch's neck for insulting Pandora. Perhaps one of the most disturbing ones is the one where Kratos uses this prisoner held by Poseidon to hold up a gate wheel, resulting in her getting brutally crushed, further showing that Kratos has no regard for anyone this time. The challenge mode from the first 2 games returns as the Challenge of Olympus. Same deal as before, they're bonus challenges with specific criterias. I don't have much to say other than have fun. The game also has some DLC costumes, which are included in the remastered PlayStation 4 version. This game got the PS4 treatment while its predecessors were left stranded on the PlayStation 3. And you wonder why it took me 5 years to finally get around to playing God of War 2018. Remember how I mentioned that God of War 3 was intended to be released with 1080p visuals, but the developers had to lock the game at 720? Well, the team at Wholesale Algorithms managed to deliver Sony Santa Monica's original intended vision, with 1080p visuals and 60 frames a second. Cool! Though the PS3 version already looked fantastic, so the PS4 version isn't too much of a graphical leap. But it's nice to get all the DLC outfits, and a good bunch of them are based on earlier designs for Kratos. Including, of course, a version with his blue tattoo! Hashtag release the blue tattoo cut. There's also Apollo. Okay. And even Deimos. Cool! And again, playing the PS4 version on the PS5 with the PS5 controller feels really nice. And there's a photo mode. Why not have it, I suppose. The voice acting overall is very well done once again. Terrence C. Carson is pretty great as usual, although there are some moments where he sounds a bit too quiet, and the music drowns out his voice a bit.
You aspire to be an Olympian, yet their reign is ending their careers.
The sound mixing is nowhere near as bad as Sonic Adventure 2, but there are some instances where it could have been better. And TC Carson still does a great job for the final chapter of his character's journey. Reprising her role from Chains of Olympus, Erin Torfey provides her voice for Athena. She's pretty good, I suppose. But the real highlight is Corey Burton, who once again delivers a memorable performance as the game's antagonist, Zeus. He once again makes him sound like a credible villain, and hilarious at the same time.
Excellent child! I will tolerate your insolence no more!
Seriously, how do you make a villain sound badass and over the top at the same time? The soundtrack is pretty good once again. While only a handful of songs stood out to me, that's not to say that the soundtrack isn't very well done. It still delivers on the grand and epic vibes. I also like Pandora's theme, as it is lonely sounding with a hint of hope. But Rage of Sparta is certainly the most memorable piece of music from the game for a good reason. It perfectly conveys how pissed off Kratos is by this point, and that he's out for the blood of all gods and anyone who happens to stand in the way of his revenge. I mean, this theme is even used on both versions of the PlayStation menu before you boot up the game. I know I've been more focused on God of War 3's story than its gameplay, but to be honest, I don't have as much to say since most games in the Greek era boil down to being an evolution of the first entry. And the biggest change God of War 3 brings to the table is the leap in graphics to the PlayStation 3, and the most additions it has to the gameplay is new weapons and puzzles to solve, and its main priority is to wrap up the trilogy. So does God of War 3 effectively bring the story of Kratos to a close? Let's see as we enter the third act of the story. Kratos finds Pandora, and she is glad to see Kratos, who surprisingly is concerned for her well-being. Probably because she reminds him of his daughter Calliope. Pandora is able to tap into the last of what remains of Kratos' destroyed humanity, and they have a conversation on their philosophies of hope. Kratos believes that hope is for the weak and brings nothing but pain and false promises. Which makes sense given that the gods broke their promise to him and he gave up on hope in the first game. Pandora, on the contrary, insists that hope does not make anyone weak, and that it is a strength that anyone can use when all else is lost. When they reach the flame, Kratos starts to have second thoughts. After not only brutally killing all of the gods, carelessly turning Greece into dire docks, and killing a bunch of random civilians who were just unfortunate enough to get in his path, only now Kratos is starting to have second thoughts, and show concern for someone who just happens to remind him of his daughter. But then, Zeus enters the chat, and disgustingly refers to Pandora as nothing more than a soulless object. Kratos yells at Zeus to put the girl down, so he yeets her, and we then begin the first phase of the final battle with the King of Olympus. Hey, it's that stage from Mortal Kombat 9! Man, I wish I had played this game before doing the Mortal Kombat 9 review. The first phase plays like a 2D fighter, as you are locked in a closed space with Kratos and Zeus facing each other. The best way to get some easy hits on Zeus is to try and hit him from behind, or use your heavy blade attacks to get him while he's in the air. And when he's throwing those lightning bolts, just get under him and roll behind him to get some easy hits. And also remember to parry. After the Mortal Kombat phase of the fight, Pandora takes her chance to jump into the flame, but Kratos catches her hand desperately trying to save her. Pandora demands Kratos to let her go, while Zeus tells Kratos not to do it. He tries convincing him not to fail her like he failed his family, and obviously, why would Kratos want to listen to his prick of a father? Kratos once again opens Pandora's box. But to his shock, it's empty. It was all for nothing. Pandora's life was traded for an empty box. And Zeus laughs at Kratos like a big bully for failing spectacularly yet again.
After all you have sought, after all you have sacrificed, it ends in another stunning failure!
We then follow Zeus to begin the second phase of the fight on his balcony, where he looks at all of the death and destruction caused by Kratos. He claims that he will have much to do after he's finished with Kratos, and father and son agree on one thing: it is time to end this. You get to fight Zeus for a little bit before being interrupted by Gaia. You know, this might have gone much better for her if she chose her words more carefully instead of treating Kratos like a worthless pawn. Because the second phase of this fight takes to the traitor's heart. In this phase, you'll want to use similar tactics during your last fight with Zeus in God of War 2. You'll want to memorize his fight pattern and prepare to counter him with the Golden Fleece. But this time Zeus can clone himself, so watch out. Be sure to use your crowd control attacks when he does this. The both of you will also be able to give Gaia a heart attack to restore your health, so just try to make sure not to give Zeus that chance. And the final boss theme here is epic. The name of this song is called Brothers of Blood, and it has reworked elements of the final boss theme from the first God of War game, which was ironically called Zeus Wrath Divine. Brothers of Blood has new lyrics, and ironically, even though the original iteration of this song was used during Ares' boss fight in the first game, it had some interesting lyrics. And if this translation is correct, it has some serious foreshadowing. Good reuse of music, I must say. Oh yeah, it's also worth mentioning that this song was also remixed in God of War 2, when Kratos rides the Phoenix on his way to see the Sisters of Fate, so he can have a rematch against Zeus. And it was reused for God of War Chains of Olympus' final boss fight, probably due to the game's lower budget and being developed by a smaller studio. I didn't notice back then when I initially reviewed these games that this music was reused throughout the series, and I only noticed recently upon playing the games back to back, so yeah, there it is now. You finish off the fight with once again having a tug of war over the Blade of Olympus, before finishing off Zeus and Gaia at the same time with the blade. The Mother of Earth falls apart, and after Kratos gets his bearings, he takes the Blade of Olympus out of Zeus's body and checks to make sure he's down for good this time. Unfortunately, he was wrong, as Zeus's soul leaves his body and strikes a heavy blow to Kratos. All of the weapons that Kratos acquired throughout God of War 2 and 3 are now rendered useless. Zeus then grabs his son by the neck, draining all of his health and magic upgrades away, before snapping his neck. Kratos is thrown into a realm engulfed in fear and darkness, where he unpleasantly relives himself killing his wife and daughter again. But this time he's forced to listen to their final moments from their perspective before he came busting through the door and mindlessly slaughtered them, further reminding him how he failed as a husband and father. However, Pandora's voice helps guide Kratos through the fear and darkness, and encourages Kratos to embrace the power of hope, which helps him re-encounter his family, as the voice of Lysandra encourages him to forgive himself. Kratos, without saying anything, hugs his family one last time before they disappear for good. Kratos may not be able to forgive himself for his horrible deeds just yet, but he's ready to take his first step to moving forward and let go of his desire for vengeance. He's then forced to relive his killing of Athena, who informs Kratos that Zeus is afraid of being overthrown and is using the power of fear in an attempt to consume Kratos, but that he can fight it by confronting his demons head on. Kratos comes across a familiar cliff where he attempted to end his life at the beginning and end of the first game, and he hears his own words before leaping off the cliff again, but this time his past words are cut off at,
"The gods of Olympus have abandoned me. Now there is."
Kratos at the end of God of War 1 had no hope for his future, but now the ending of God of War 3 is about him learning to embrace the power of hope. Kratos falls into a river of blood and is further haunted by the voices of his many victims, and even the voice of his brother Deimos, who instead of being voiced by Mark Declan, is now voiced by Elijah Wood!
A Spartan never lets his back hit the ground. Right, brother? Don't leave me again, Kratos!
I suppose that this game came out a few months before Ghost of Sparta, but still quite odd that Deimos' voice changed so quickly between two games that were released in the same year. But regardless, it's fitting to have Deimos' voice here, as he was Kratos' closest family member, and his torment and death is one of Kratos' biggest regrets, and how he failed to protect his little brother. It further cements Ghost of Sparta as one of the most crucial entries in the franchise, and not just a pointless spin-off made for a handheld device. As Pandora's voice guides Kratos to his destination, his tattoo turns blue. That's a really nice nod to his earlier design. Hashtag release the blue tattoo cut! Kratos opens the box once again and manages to reawaken the very power he used to destroy Ares. A power even stronger than the fear that consumes Zeus. The power of hope! We then get a final phase where we're thrown into a first-person view and get to force Zeus' soul back into his body. Kratos then looks at the hideous blades that he's been cursed with since his pledge to Ares, and decides no more. He furiously throws the blades away and beats the ever-living shit out of Zeus. And you can keep bashing that circle button to punch this bastard as many times as you want until the screen is covered entirely in blood. Also, I know that technically the Blades of Exile are classified as different from the Blades of Chaos, but I don't care, because it makes more sense for them to be the same set of weapons for the entire series, because all of the blood that Kratos spilled with the blades during the events of this game further cements his hatred towards them, and ultimately pays off with him throwing them away, and instead deciding to beat Zeus with his bare hands. And with that, Zeus's body explodes, and Kratos finally got his revenge. But it didn't make his guilt or pain any better. In fact, if anything, it made it worse. After seeing all of the death and destruction he caused, he feels nothing but regret for the countless innocent people he carelessly killed, or doomed just to fill his thirst for revenge. Athena congratulates Kratos and tells him that she can now deliver mankind her message. Kratos in response tells her, "Bitch, I destroyed the fucking world! What is the point?" Athena claims that she needs the power of hope to deliver her message, and comes to the realization that it was never in the box since Kratos took it in the first game when he used it to destroy Ares. While the powers of evil such as greed and fear infected the gods and made them into bigger pricks than they already were. But Kratos has been subconsciously holding on to the power of hope since his battle with Ares, and it has been locked away by his anger and pain. Athena tries to convince Kratos that now that his task is finished, she can put it to good use. I have a pretty good feeling with Athena's agenda being all over the place, along with her alliance with Kratos going back and forth throughout the series, that this was her big plan all along. From the day she took part in Deimos' kidnapping and told Ares to spare Kratos, then years later guiding the latter to kill the former, turning against the Spartan in the second game, and then realigning herself with him in this game, it was her ultimate plan to manipulate her little brother into bringing the marked warrior prophecy the gods feared and ended up bringing upon themselves. Her goal is to overthrow the gods and become humanity's sole guiding light of hope. And when you take into account her allegiance with Kratos going back and forth throughout the series, it makes sense when you think of her secretly being the mastermind villain of the events of the Greek saga under the player's nose, and this being her big ultimate plan that took a lot of time, steps, and patience to bring into fruition. And now her goal is almost within reach. But she makes one crucial mistake in the home stretch of her plan. She trusts Kratos to give the power of hope back to her. And Kratos at this point is through with being manipulated by gods, and is sure that the last thing humanity needs right now is false leadership from another god only looking out for herself. So Kratos grabs the Blade of Olympus once more, and stabs himself with it. Athena watches in despair as the power she longed for leaves Kratos' body. After all the death and destruction he caused, Kratos finally makes a selfless decision and releases the power of hope back to humanity so that they can move forward for themselves and rebuild without the false guidance of a selfish god.
That was meant for me! They will
play a sad song for you on the world's smallest violin.
Athena expresses her disappointment to the Spartan before Kratos smirks at her. In the end, he got the last laugh. Before Athena pulls the blade out of his stomach, leaving her brother to die on top of Mount Olympus. A seemingly fitting end for Kratos' story. After all the pain, suffering, and destruction he caused, he is seemingly past the point of redemption. But he at least got to go out on doing one last good deed. So that was God of War 3, a fitting conclusion to the Greek era of the franchise. The jump to high definition made for one of the best looking PlayStation 3 games. The combat is better than ever, and the boxing gloves are super fun to use. The bosses are satisfying to beat, with more faces from Greek mythology. And while the game can be tough at times, it makes sense with this being the final set of hurdles for Kratos to overcome to fulfill his revenge. When it comes to which version you should get, it really doesn't matter. While it is convenient to have this game on PS4 with updated visuals, the PS3 version still holds up really well, though you don't get the DLC. Last I checked, the game along with all of its downloadable content are no longer available for download on the PlayStation 3 store. But if you want to experience the entire Greek saga, you can if you have a PlayStation 3, since all of the games have received remastered ports on that console. There was a complete collection released in 2012, titled the God of War Saga. The problem though, Chains of Olympus and Ghost of Sparta were included as a download code, which is stupid whenever developers and publishers organize collections this way, because if someone were to buy the game used or when the servers go down, they're not getting the complete collection. And Sony should really port these games to PS4 and PS5 already, since the PlayStation 3 was 2 generations ago now. And sure, you could try them out via PS Plus, but it just isn't the same. I much prefer having games to myself without having to pay a subscription to access them. And while streaming games works, I suppose, if you have a decent internet connection, it's not ideal. And the PSP games are not included on the PS Plus catalog. But regardless, it is still possible to experience the entire God of War Greek saga via the PlayStation 3. And it's a great feeling when you can play through an entire series on one console and not have to worry about tracking down another expensive device just to play that one game that the console you already have cannot play. And playing all of the God of War games back to back really does make for a well-told story about the downfall of Kratos. He started off as a brutal, ruthless warrior with some sympathetic qualities, and after losing people close to him and receiving false promises throughout the course of the series, it results in him becoming a villain by the final entry. Sure, the gods are selfish dicks, and Kratos had logical reasons to kill them after all the pain they caused not just to him, but also those who blindly worshipped them. But Kratos had no care or regard for the consequences of his actions until he finally got what he wanted. And I like God of War 3's theme of hope being a strong motivator in the darkest of times. With the story ending on a very dark but hopeful note. Kratos finally got his revenge, but was it worth it? And him dying for his horrible deeds seems like a fitting way to end his story. Except, not really. Because in an after credit scene, the Blade of Olympus remains in a pool of blood atop of Mount Olympus, but Kratos' body is missing. The blood now has a trail leading to the edge of a cliff, so it's pretty clear that Kratos survived being impaled, and that his story may not be over just yet. His death would have been just, but it was not to be.